Good morning. Thanks to Lizzie for filling in, doing some improv as worship leader this morning. Appreciate that. My name is Joe, and my pronouns are he and him, and I've got a weed problem. Anyone recognize this beautiful flower? Yeah. What do you know? What is it? Creeping bellflower, not just the bellflower. Those are different. It's invasive. Yeah, how do you feel about the creeping bellflower, those of you who know? Yes, dig and dig, and then what happens? It digs. You can get rid of it, I'm told, but it is very difficult. Wanted for murder, the creeping bellflower. This invasive plant may look beautiful, but it aggressively takes over gardens and yards, strangling out native plants and flowers. Creeping bellflower spreads rapidly through underground roots, making it nearly impossible to remove once established. Dun, 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 dun. And this is, as you know, true story. A couple of years ago, I noticed these lovely blue flowers in the back alley of our house. And Carrie informed me that they were the enemy, and that she'd been trying to get them out of the little patch of potatoes that she was growing back in the alley, and had no luck. And in the years since, they have moved under our fence and into the corner of the backyard. Carrie has them contained kind of in the back corner there under our Saskatoonberry bush, and that's where they are for now. This is an invasive species that can be quite damaging. The bellflowers do. They grow and go wherever they want, and they crowd out other plants. Left untended, they can take over lawns and gardens. And even when a gardener declares all-out war, they can still take over. I've been thinking about creeping bellflower this week because it reminds me of another tale of unrestrained ambition and growth. The Tower of Babel. Babel, I call it Babel. As the book of Genesis describes it, following the global reset of Noah and the flood, humanity again spread out over the known world. In the region of Shinar, perhaps located near the modern borders of Iraq and Iran, a sophisticated civilization emerged. These people had great skill in making bricks and asphalt, and they made plans to build an impressive city and an even more impressive tower. Come, let us build for ourselves a city and a tower with its top in the sky, and let us make a name for ourselves so that we won't be dispersed over all the earth. A vision of unity and strength. But something about this is not good. The storytellers of Genesis say that Yahweh was troubled by this development. Then Yahweh came down to see the city and the tower that the humans built. And Yahweh said, "There is now one people, and they have all one language. This is what they've begun to do, and now all that they plan to do will be possible for them. Come, let's go down and mix up their language there, so they won't understand each other's language." Then Yahweh dispersed them from there all over all of the earth, and they stopped building the city. Therefore it is named Babel, because there Yahweh mixed up the languages of all the earth, and from there Yahweh dispersed them over all the earth. Interesting. The scholars will note that the word for mix up in Hebrew is balal. So this is an ancient dad joke. Babel, more like Balal, am I right? With the butt of the joke being the powerful city of Babel, aka Babylonian, or the Babylonians in Babylon. Always love a good dad joke. Throughout the history, there's more. Throughout the history of the ancient Hebrews, Babylon was the neighborhood villain, the empire that constantly threatened their independence and their very existence. So the Tower of Babel is a story that the backwaters told to poke fun at the center, a rebel tale against the excess and snobbery of the empire, a joke that Saskatchewan might tell about Ontario. I mean, they think they're the center of the universe. Toronto, more like Boronto, am I right? From the perspective of the rural Hebrews, there was something rotten at the core of the empire, something that offended the God of the Hebrews. The storyteller describes the goal of the Babylonians as unification and centralized power. Let's make a name for ourselves so that we won't be dispersed over all the earth. Prior to this, following the flood of Noah, these humans were nomads. They were wandering the earth, and Babel was their attempt to settle down, to create something permanent, to build a civilization. So the conflict here is a lifestyle shift from nomadic hunter-gatherer clans to agrarian urban settlements, the Neolithic agricultural revolution for all the anthropologists out there. Of course, through our modern eyes, this tower looks like progress, agriculture, stability, surplus, and growth. But apparently Yahweh was troubled by this development. And so God came near and disrupted these plans, confusing their communications, scattering them again over the face of the earth. This is an unsettling story. Can God really be opposed to communication, cooperation, civilization itself? Is there something sinful about human progress? Better shut down this PowerPoint and practice my flint napping. I'm pro any kind of napping, to be honest. I'll remind us again that the Bible is a collection of many voices, cultivated over many centuries. Much of the Bible is pro-civilization, pro-technology, pro-urban development. The primary vision of the afterlife is the city of God, the ultimate green city with the river of the healing at its center. I don't think that God is against progress or civilization or skyscrapers. And there is a caution in these stories of early humanity in the book of Genesis. There is a warning that civilization is not an unbridled good either. Brian McLaren describes how human civilizations go through what could be called an adaptive cycle. First comes growth, expansion. The people of earth traveled east. They found a valley in the land of Shinar and settled there. They said to each other, "Come, let's make bricks and bake them hard." And they used bricks for stones and asphalt for mortar. McLaren uses the term exploitation for this, but not in a negative sense. The people had resources, and they used the resources that were available to them. Clay can be baked and hardened. That is useful for building shelters and structures. This is better. Let's make more. Better accommodations, better technology, actual surplus instead of living hand to mouth all the time. That leads to fewer deaths, more births. Adaptation to the environment leads to growth. As growth takes hold, the civilization stabilizes. Technology and surplus lead to organization, institutions, education, clergy, all the things of society. We don't produce anything. Good thing that somebody does, thanks for civilization. Come, let's build for ourselves a city and a tower with its top in the sky. Let's make a name for ourselves so that we won't be dispersed over all the earth. So that is the apex of what we call civilization. But then comes the downside. Eventually, something goes wrong. Enemies invade, disease or famine devastates, internal factions divide. Society collapses under its own weight. In the biblical telling, the collapse of Babel comes through divine intervention. Come, let's go down and mix up their language so they won't understand each other. And then Yahweh dispersed them from there over all the earth, and they stopped building the city. And the bricks that they were so proud of eventually returned to dust. But the story doesn't end with Babel, just like it didn't start with Babel. The biblical writers put this story of the Tower of Babel right in the middle of the section of genealogy describing the descendants of Noah, from Noah to Shem to Arpachshad to Shelah, and so on. Civilization rose and fell, but the line of humanity carried on. And eventually, from the descendants of Noah, the line leads to Abraham, father of nations. So out of the dust of the Tower City comes many other cities, and out of those cities comes Abraham. The rest of Genesis is a close-up, a zoom in on the origin story of a different civilization, the Hebrews, and their building of the nation of Israel. Every collapse contains the seeds of rebirth, reorganization. The cycle continues. So that is the history of humanity, from Babylon to Great Britain, from Assyria to the Aztecs, from Mali to the Mongols. Growth, stability, collapse, rebirth, over and over. Of course, this is not just the pattern of civilization, but of the natural world as well. This is my life in a nutshell, ashes to ashes, baby. That's me, and that's you too. Speaking of ashes, we know that this is what's going on with the forest fires as well. The fires are terrible, but they are not the end of the forest. They're actually, in some ways, essential to the forest itself. And in many areas, it's actually the extending of the conservation stability stage that has caused the buildup of materials that are now feeding the fires and making the collapse stage more intense and destructive. But in spite of the intensity, give it time, and the forest will be, already is being, reborn. So this cycle is forests and farming. It's the food chain, the circle of life, and not just life, but nature in general. This is weather. This is the seasons. It's geology across the millennia, stars and solar systems, galaxies, and we can only assume the universe itself appears to be following this pattern also. I have only a rudimentary understanding of the physics involved, but this is the conservation of matter, the conservation of energy. Nothing is truly gained or lost. There's only transformation, the fundamental laws of observable reality. And I recognize this pattern as a spiritual reality as well. As Christians, we call this Easter. Jesus is born, that's Christmas. His life and ministry, that is Lent. His crucifixion and death on Good Friday, and then the empty tomb of Easter. And then again, the next thing, the rebirth of Pentecost. And around we go again. So this cycle is all over the place in our Christian theology and imagery. Creation, the fall, and redemption. Some of you know those terms. We sing it all the time. In the end is our beginning, in our life eternity. Nothing is lost on the breath of God. This is the story that we find ourselves in. So, back to the Tower of Babel. It seems to me that the issue here is not that they built a civilization. The issue is that they tried to disrupt and prevent the cycle. Let's build a city and a tower, make a name for ourselves so that we won't be dispersed over all the earth. The Hebrew word translated as dispersed there means broken, shattered. Not us. We're not going down that way. They didn't want their thing to end. Creeping bellflowers. We're not going anywhere. Endless growth, perpetual motion, manifest destiny. Do you Canadians know that term, manifest destiny? It's an American thing for sure, a term for the 19th century settling of the American West. It's the uniting of a nation from sea to shining sea that was both obvious, it was manifest, this is what's happening, and certain, this is our destiny. Cowboy up, we win because, well, we're the good guys and we're supposed to. Progress is our destiny. USA, more like boo-SA. Of course, this didn't start with America, and we are part of it too. As individuals, we try to break this cycle in so many ways. I am middle-aged. The game is all about trying to get back to the growth cycle, to look younger, to be fit, to keep up my testosterone levels. For what exactly, I have no idea. I know that I can't get back to the growth stage, but I'm holding on to this stability stage for dear life. I hope that the seniors in the room are more mature than I am, but that is certainly how our culture is oriented. And then collectively, we fear the collapse of our civilization as well. Here we are this summer, naming it as doom, fretting about what we might do to prevent it. I know it's more complicated than that. And we want this thing, we want life, we want society, we want this thing as we know it. We don't want that to end. We want our progress to save us. We want to skip back to the growth. We want to double down on our investments, stimulate the economy, expedite the research, power up the production machine. At the very least, let's keep calm and carry on. Shore up the foundations. Peace, order, and good government, that will carry us through. At the bare minimum, we want to, if we have to collapse, well, let's just do it real quick. Let's minimize the damage, and we'll get on with this rebirth thing as efficiently as possible. Anything less feels like doom. But is it? Take a step back for a second. Where is the doom in this pattern? Is it doom to move on to the next stage? It feels like it. To collapse feels awful when you're in it. But is it doom when even the collapse contains the seeds of regeneration? Or would doom actually be the end of the cycle entirely, to get stuck in conservation or in any of the phases, so that new life does not actually happen? It depends on how you look at it. Is this a system of destruction, or is it a system of resurrection? Could it be both? All who want to save their lives will lose them, but all who lose their lives in my way, in the gospel way, all who will lose their lives will save them. This is the way of Christ. Let me say here that this is in no way meant to minimize the pain and sorrow that comes with the collapse stage. Suffering, death is a part of life, and I sure wish it wasn't. This doom that we've been talking about, it feels like doom because in so many ways it will be, it already is. This is not to say that we can shrug off pain and death and destruction, especially when it's the suffering of others. Suffering is natural, it is part of this, but it's also bad. What this pattern tells us, I hope, is that the struggle, the pain is not meaningless. It is actually purposeful. It has meaning. That doesn't undo the pain and vulnerability that comes with humanity. I hope it does reframe it, make a place for it. Pain also belongs and has its place in the circle. So for those who are struggling, if you feel pain, I hear you. We are with you. We are in this together, and God is with us in this. That doesn't make it good, the pain part, but it does, I hope, let it be what it is. This also doesn't mean that we can passively accept the destruction of the environment or the collapse of our civilization. Again, this is inevitable. The doom cycle, the adaptive cycle tells us. It's inevitable, but it's also painful, bad, evil, whatever the word is. This cycle is natural, and it's so far beyond us, and yet we do have a part to play in it. We don't, on the one hand, throw up our hands and weep in guilt at the destruction that we've wrought. But neither do we just pull back and embrace nihilism, eat and drink, for tomorrow we die. Neither of those things are helpful. Somewhere in between is a healthy place where we acknowledge our part in all of this, and we do what we can. We might be creeping bellflowers, but we can take some responsibility for our action. Not the responsibility of control or ownership, but the responsibility of connection. We are part of this. We are cells in the larger organism. When the earth thrives, we thrive, and her pain is our pain, and vice versa. So these are the patterns. This is natural law, and we are alive within it. Another gift of recognizing this pattern is that it is not the first turn of the wheel. From Brian McLaren, we are not the first ones here. Other civilizations have collapsed, and some people survived it. Now it's our turn. After returning home from my fishing trip, he's telling a story in his chapter, I come across this story from retired Episcopal Bishop and Choctaw elder Stephen Charleston. Charleston writes, I was asked to write a brief commentary about the Christian theology of the apocalypse, the final terrible vision of the end of the world. I said my Native American culture was in a unique position to speak of this kind of vision because we were among the few cultures that have already experienced it. In historic memory, we have seen our reality come crashing down as invaders destroyed our homeland. We have lived through genocide, concentration camps, religious persecution, and every human rights abuse imaginable. Yet we are still here. No darkness, not even the end of the world as we knew it, had the power to overcome us. So our message is powerful, not only not because it is only for us, but because it speaks to and for every human heart that longs for light over darkness. McLaren continues, Charleston makes it clear that he is not claiming that his ancestors were superior to other people. Instead, their suffering was a window into our shared human condition during times of release and reorganization. In their suffering, my ancestors embodied the finite and vulnerable condition of all humanity. They modeled both that the suffering is great and that the end of the world can be survived. Not without unimaginable pain, not without unimaginable social and psychological disruption, not without heartbreaking tragedy and loss, but it can be done. We're not the first ones here. I love that. It doesn't fix anything, but it is encouraging. It points to the truth of the cycle, that there is rebirth and renewal, however painful. It also points to sources of wisdom, to the value of listening to voices who have been there before, whose traditions and cultures have sustained them through this. Indigenous voices, immigrant voices, Black voices, Jewish voices, the voices of the islanders already carrying the destruction of the climate crisis, etc. I think next week Lizzie is going to lead us through some more of that. One more point, and that is to restate that avoiding doom is not the point. I said it earlier, doom is what happens when we try to freeze the cycle, to postpone the collapse indefinitely, or to shortcut back to growth directly. When we shorten the cycle and cut out the destruction portion of the program, we also eliminate the rebirth phase. I saw the latest Jurassic Park movie this week. It was an exciting experience, I suppose. But as a movie, as a story, it was predictably awful. There was nothing new, just all the old scenes, the same dialogue stretched thin over a new set of bigger and badder mutant monsters. Letting the franchise die, trying a new story, that would be risky. And so they just jumped back to the beginning and offered growth, make everything bigger and flashier, rather than searching for goodness. That's hardly doom, but you get what I mean. A more natural example would be reforestation projects. I've stood in the middle of forest lands that have been clear-cut. After the trees have been removed, there's pretty much nothing left but mud and debris from the logging. And as we know, there's usually a mandate for the logging companies to replant trees. And over time, after they've replanted, the trees come back and all is well. Renewable resource, new forest. Kind of. The reality, as I understand it, is that this kind of mass replanting results in a monoculture that is very different from a natural forest. Different kinds of undergrowth, different biodiversity, different animal habits, and not nearly the same kind of benefits as far as carbon sequestration and all of the things that we want from forests. Not to say that tree planting is useless, just that it's not a solution. It's not reforestation, in spite of the branding. It is a shortcut. In this case, we create the collapse, but we disrupt the collapse. We don't allow the decay that actually comes to happen. We try to get back to the growing phase as soon as possible. And when you remove a resource from the cycle, it can't be easily replaced. The true collapse, decay and redistribution of the nutrients of the forest, that collapse is actually essential to the true rebirth and future growth of a healthy forest. Not that logging is evil, just that there's a difference between regrowth and actual sustainability, renewability. As Robin Wall Kimmerer describes, a better way is to harvest in a way that minimizes harm. Take only what is given. Never take more than half. In other words, honor the cycle. Don't disrupt it. Let it do its thing. If we don't, if I put myself at the center of the story, then I become that creeping bellflower. So the goal is not to prevent doom. The goal is to be here, now, wherever we are in the cycle. To honor ourselves. There's no point in hastening our destruction. The cells that make up my body have a purpose. They are limited, spinning through this cycle so quickly, but I definitely don't want my cells to check out early just because, well, they're going to die soon enough anyway. We have a part to play in this organism of God's creation. Our lives have meaning and purpose there. With the emphasis on being part of, we honor ourselves in relationship to those around us and to the larger being. A proverb that I've adapted from the novel Ishmael by Daniel Quinn. The premise of the modern story is the world belongs to humanity. The premise of the ancient biblical story is humanity belongs to the world. That is true all the way around this cycle, through doom and beyond. Once again, this way of thinking about doom, it doesn't solve much of anything. I hope it does give us space to tell a different story about it. Does that matter? It does to me. That's what we're here for, to remind ourselves of the greater story of our faith. In a minute, we're going to participate in the ancient ritual of communion. As we all know, communion is where we remember Jesus laying down his life, embracing his own personal doom, inviting us into his way of doom, that we may also join him in the resurrection and in the new life. In her book, Braiding Sweetgrass, Robin Wall Kimmerer describes the process of making baskets from black ash trees, how a tree literally gives its life for each basket that she makes. And when she holds her basket, she hears the basket maker saying, "Slow down. It's 30 years of a tree's life you've got in your hands there. Don't you owe it a few minutes to think about what you will do with it?" What would it be like to live with that heightened sensitivity to the lives given for ours? To consider the tree in the Kleenex, the algae in the toothpaste, the oaks in the floor, the grapes in the wine, to follow back the thread of life in everything and pay it respect. Once you start, it's hard to stop, and you begin to feel yourself awash in gifts. This is communion. It's not only one life that has been given for ours, it is so many lives. The life of the grapes pressed to make the juice, the life of the wheat in the bread, the lives of the creatures whose bodies went into the growing of the grapes, the nourishment that raised the wheat, the lives of the farmers who poured their being into cultivating and harvesting, and so on. So many lives given for ours, interwoven with ours, sharing their substance, their energy, joining ours. Slow down. Don't you owe them a few minutes to think about what you will do with the life they have given? This is the story we find ourselves in. May God give us the gratitude and grace to live well as part of the fullness of it all. Amen.